I systematically destroyed my family at what was supposed to be a perfect Thanksgiving dinner. I watched their world crumble as I laid every secret bare. I didn't do it for money. I did it for the little girl who was promised a home, only to have it stolen by the sister who blackmailed our father to his grave. The air in the lawyer's office was thick, smelling of polished wood and old paper. It had been a week since my father, Robert's, funeral, but the grief was still a raw, open wound in my chest. I sat straight-backed in the leather chair, my hands clenching the worn straps of my handbag. It's a nervous habit of mine. Across from me, my sister, Beverly, dabbed at perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Beside her, my mother, Barbara, just sat, looking small and lost in the imposing room. Deep down, I knew I shouldn't expect anything, but a small flicker of hope refused to die. The family home, the place I'd grown up in, the place I'd cared for my parents in during their final years. Dad had promised me, on a quiet afternoon, that it would be mine. The lawyer cleared his throat, the rustle of paper sounding unnaturally loud. He read through the clauses, the minor assets, until he reached the final passage. And finally, he said, his voice a flat monotone, the entire estate, the savings accounts, and all remaining personal property, I leave to my beloved daughter, Beverly. Time seemed to stop. A ringing started in my ears. Not Beverly, surely. I held my breath, waiting for a correction, for him to say there'd been some mistake. But there was nothing. Just a heavy silence and the faint, triumphant smirk I caught on Beverly's face. It wasn't just losing a house, it was my entire life of sacrifice, erased with a single sentence. I have to wonder, for any of you listening to my story right now, have you ever felt that knife in your back from the very person you were supposed to trust? That feeling, it's a pain worse than any death. My mind drifts back to a Thanksgiving, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's funny how the memories that are supposed to be happy are the ones that cut the deepest now. For 2 straight days, I'd been on my feet in that warm, familiar kitchen, the one that was supposed to be mine. I'd brined the turkey, peeled a mountain of potatoes for Dad's favorite mashed potatoes, and baked 3 different kinds of pies from scratch because everyone had a different favorite. The house was filled with the scent of cinnamon, roasting herbs, and my tireless effort. I remember feeling exhausted, but happy, believing I was creating a perfect holiday for the people I loved most. Then, 2 hours late, Beverly breezed in. She was holding a single, perfect-looking pumpkin pie from the most expensive bakery in town. My father, Robert, immediately lit up. "Look what Beverly brought," he'd boomed, giving her a hug. Always so thoughtful. My own pies, the ones I'd woken up at 5 a.m. to bake, sat on the counter, suddenly invisible. My 2 days of labor were just expected. Her 5-minute purchase was a grand gesture. That was the rhythm of our family, the unspoken rule we all lived by. I did the work. She got the credit. I'm sure many of you know what that's like. In every family, we all get cast in a role, don't we? Were you the caregiver, the peacemaker, or the golden child? Sometimes you don't even realize you're playing a part until the final act. The memory that hurts the most is from a Christmas Eve, maybe 10 years ago. Everyone else had gone to bed, and the house was finally quiet, blanketed in a soft, peaceful dark. I was in the living room, gathering the last of the discarded wrapping paper, the scent of pine needles and fireplace embers still hanging in the air. I didn't mind the cleaning. It was my quiet time to soak in the warmth of the day. My father, Robert, came downstairs for a glass of water and found me there. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stood in the doorway, watching me. Then he walked over and put a heavy, comforting hand on my shoulder. His gaze swept across the room, over the tree I'd decorated and the stockings I'd hung so carefully over the mantel. "This house has your heart in its walls, Judith," he said, his voice low and raspy. "You're the one who keeps it beating." He looked me straight in the eye then, and his gaze was so clear, so sincere. "After your mother and I are gone, this place is yours. It's only right." I remember the feeling of warmth that spread through my chest, a deep sense of security and love. That promise became my anchor. It was the reason I never felt resentful for all the sacrifices, the reason I stayed when I could have left. I believed him. I held on to those words like a sacred vow. Now, that memory, once my greatest comfort, has become a cruel ghost, mocking me with the ghost of a future that was stolen from me. The ride home from the lawyer's office was suffocatingly silent. The hum of the engine was the only sound, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I finally turned to my mother, my voice barely a whisper, desperate for some kind of anchor. "Mom, you heard what he read. But Dad promised me the house. You were there." She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the passing scenery, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. "Your sister needs it more, dear," she murmured, her voice thin as a thread. "Her husband's business. It isn't doing well." The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting, it was like a slap in the face. As if Beverly's latest financial drama could somehow negate a lifetime of my devotion. It was easier for her to justify the lie than to stand up for the truth. Just then, my phone buzzed, the sound jarring me. It was Beverly. I almost didn't answer, but some morbid curiosity took over. Her voice was crisp, businesslike, completely devoid of sympathy. "I'll need you to start clearing out Dad's things by the end of the month," she said, as if she were talking to a hired hand. "The realtor wants to list the house as soon as possible." I couldn't speak. The cruelty of it stole the air from my lungs. She wasn't just taking my inheritance, she was evicting me from my own memories. The betrayal was no longer just a wound. It was a gaping chasm, and I was falling into it. It makes me wonder, what's the most heartless thing a family member has ever said to you? In that moment, I think I was hearing mine. It wasn't just the words, it was the casual, effortless way she threw my life away. As I sit in my small, quiet apartment, the life I could have lived plays out in my mind like a faded movie. It's a montage of small, quiet surrenders, each one a brick in the wall of the life I have now. I remember when I was in my 40s, I was offered a promotion, a real career opportunity. The only catch was that it was in a different state, a 5-hour drive away. I was so excited, but then I thought about who would check in on Mom and Dad every day, who would be there if the plumbing backed up or if one of them fell. Beverly was busy with her own life, her own family. So, I turned it down. I told myself it was for the best. Then there was the winter, the furnace died. It was the coldest week of the year, and the repair was going to cost thousands. My father, his pride wounded, didn't know what to do. Beverly offered sympathy over the phone, but no actual help. So, I took the money from my own savings account, the one I'd been building for my own retirement, and paid for it. "We'll pay you back, Judith," my father had said. They never did. It was just another cost of being the responsible daughter. I was the one who drove him to his chemo appointments, who sat for hours in sterile waiting rooms while Beverly was on a cruise in the Caribbean. She'd send a postcard, I'd hold his hand. Each sacrifice was a thread, weaving me tighter and tighter into the fabric of their lives, until I was no longer a separate person, just a part of their support system. My apartment has never felt so small, so suffocatingly quiet. It's a neat, orderly space, but it's a place for one person. It's a place of transit, not a home. A home is where memories are made, where laughter echoes in the hallways. My home, the one I'd poured my soul into, was now just a property listing waiting to happen. I look at the photographs on my walls. There we are, a smiling family at Christmas. There's another one, from a summer barbecue, Dad flipping burgers and Beverly laughing at something he said. They look like perfect, happy moments, but now they feel like a lie. I'm in the pictures, but I'm always slightly on the edge, the one making sure everyone else's glass is full, the one who took the photo before setting the timer and running back into the frame. The pain of being overlooked for so long has become a physical weight, pressing down on my chest and making it hard to breathe. It's not the anger, that's the worst part. It's the profound loneliness. It's the realization that you could disappear, and the people who are supposed to love you most might not even notice you're gone. That night, sitting alone in the dark, the dam finally broke. The quiet grief I'd held inside for decades turned into a tidal wave. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled to the one person I knew might understand. My aunt, my father's sister, Phyllis. When she answered, all I could manage to get out was her name before the sobs took over. "I gave them everything, Aunt Phyllis." I finally choked out. "I gave them my whole life, and they gave me nothing." Beverly gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to dismantle a lifetime of memories, to pack up my parents' lives into cardboard boxes. Every object I touched was a ghost. My father's reading glasses, still resting on his favorite armchair. My mother's half-finished knitting, the needles still in the yarn. It was a slow, agonizing process, and I was doing it all alone. The last place to clear was the attic. It was hot and stuffy up there, smelling of dust and cedar and forgotten time. Sunbeams cut through the grime on the single window, illuminating dancing dust motes. I was on my hands and knees, sorting through old photo albums, when my hand brushed against a loose floorboard near my father's old makeshift desk. Curiosity got the better of me. I pried it up with my fingers. Underneath, nestled in the dark space, was a small, locked metal box. It was cold to the touch, heavy and out of place. I found an old key in his desk drawer that fit the lock perfectly. With a click, the lid sprang open. I expected to find old love letters, or perhaps some sentimental trinkets, but there was nothing like that inside. Instead, there was a second set of account ledgers, the kind with neat columns and precise handwriting, and a bundle of letters tied with old twine. It felt secret. A cold dread washed over me, but underneath it, something else stirred. A tiny, dangerous flicker of hope. A hidden box. A family secret. What do you think I found in there? Sometimes the truth is buried in the last place you'd ever think to look. That night, back in my own apartment, the metal box sat on my kitchen table under the stark glow of a single lamp. The rest of the world seemed to fall away as I began to piece together the puzzle of my father's hidden life. At first, the ledgers just looked like meticulous records, his familiar, precise handwriting filling the pages. But as I compared them to old bank statements, I'd also found a disturbing pattern emerged. There were large, regular cash withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time, for years. I cross-referenced the dates in my own old calendars. Every single withdrawal corresponded to a time Beverly had some new crisis, a can't miss business investment, a down payment on a new car, a sudden, urgent need for a home renovation. It was a slow, steady drain on my parents' life savings. Then I untied the twine around the letters. They were from a man named Mr. Henderson, my father's first business partner. My hands trembled as I read. The letters, written over decades, told a story of betrayal. Mr. Henderson accused my father of cheating him out of his share of the company they built together, the very company that had given our family its comfortable life. My father had bought his silence, it seemed, with a small settlement years ago, but the shame had clearly haunted him. The final letter, however, was the one that shattered everything. It was a draft of a letter from my father to Beverly. In it, he pleaded with her, writing that he couldn't give her any more money. He wrote that she knew the truth about Mr. Henderson and that threatening to expose him to ruin the family name was killing him. She had been blackmailing her own father. The will, the house, the money, it wasn't a gift. It was the final payment in a lifetime of extortion. The drive to Aunt Phyllis's house felt different. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in the car beside me, but now it was joined by a cold, hard anger. The metal box sat on the passenger seat, its presence a tangible truth. For the first time since my father's death, I wasn't just a victim of circumstance. I was a woman with a purpose. Phyllis opened the door before I even knocked, as if she'd been expecting me. She took one look at my face, then at the box in my hands, and simply nodded, leading me into her warm, cluttered living room that always smelled of old books and lavender. She listened without interruption as I laid everything out on her coffee table: the ledgers, the bank statements, the heartbreaking letters. I explained the timeline, the steady siphoning of money, the cruel blackmail that had bled my father dry, emotionally and financially. My voice didn't waver. It was fueled by a righteousness I hadn't felt in my entire life. When I finished, she sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to come from her very soul. "I always suspected something was wrong," she said, her gaze distant. "Your father. Robert was a good man, Judith, but he was a proud one. The shame of what happened with Mr. Henderson was his great weakness. He would have done anything to keep it buried." Her eyes, usually so gentle, hardened with a protective fire. "And your sister." Beverly found that weakness, and she twisted it into a weapon. She looked at me, her expression firm. "This isn't just about a house anymore. It's about the truth. We sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of her grandfather clock filling the room. Then she leaned forward. "The truth needs a stage," she said quietly. "And Thanksgiving is just around the corner." It was in that moment that the plan began to form, not out of hatred, but out of a desperate, burning need for justice. It makes you think, doesn't it? When you're pushed into a corner, do you crumble or do you start planning your next move? A week before Thanksgiving, the invitation arrived. It wasn't a phone call or a casual mention. It was a thick, cream-colored cardstock envelope with my name written in perfect, flowing calligraphy. Beverly was always one for appearances. The invitation was for Thanksgiving dinner to be held at her new home. The words felt like a deliberate twist of the knife. She was not just the owner, she was the grand matriarch, holding court in the house I was supposed to inherit. A day later, she called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she wanted to sound magnanimous. "Judith, darling, I do hope you're coming," she cooed. "It wouldn't be the same without you. We need to stick together as a family, now more than ever, for Mother's sake." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. She spoke of family unity while sitting in a house she had stolen through deceit and emotional blackmail. Every word was a carefully crafted performance, designed to make me feel like the ungrateful one if I refused. I took a deep breath, picturing the cold metal box sitting in my closet. "Of course, Beverly," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly steady, even to my own ears. I was playing my part now, too. The grieving, compliant older sister. I wouldn't miss it. I even added a touch of my own. "I'll bring my sweet potato casserole. I know how much Dad always loved it." A small, sharp jab that I knew she wouldn't even register. The silence on her end was brief, but I could almost hear her preening with satisfaction. She thought she had won. She had no idea that by inviting me into that house, she wasn't just setting her Thanksgiving table. She was setting the stage for her own downfall. The trap was officially set. The dining room looked exactly the same, yet felt completely alien. The same mahogany table I had polished 1,000 times, the same crystal glasses I had carefully washed after every holiday. But sitting at the head of the table, in my father's chair, was Beverly. She played the part of the gracious host beautifully, laughing and pouring wine, while I felt like a ghost at my own feast. My mother, Barbara, sat silently, picking at her food, a willing participant in the charade. The air was thick with unspoken words, with years of resentment simmering just beneath the surface of polite conversation. Beverly raised her glass, a diamond bracelet glittering on her wrist. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "To family. And to new beginnings in this beautiful home that Dad left for us." The clinking of glasses felt like a sacrilege. As the silence settled afterward, I knew this was my moment. I placed my fork down gently, the small sound cutting through the tension. My heart was pounding in my chest. It's a terrifying moment, isn't it? When you're about to break the fragile peace of a family dinner to speak a truth that no one wants to hear. "Speaking of beginnings," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and clear. I was in the attic, and I found some of Dad's old business papers. From his first company with Mr. Henderson. A fork clattered onto a plate. My mother's head snapped up, and Beverly's smile, that perfect, practiced smile, froze on her face. It was the first crack in the beautiful facade she had built around her lies. "If you're holding your breath with me, waiting for the truth to finally come out, let me know you're here by tapping that like button." Because everything was about to change. Beverly tried to laugh it off. A brittle, high-pitched sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Judith, what on earth are you talking about? Dad's old papers? You must be confused from all the stress." "I'm not confused, Beverly," I said, my gaze unwavering. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a few photocopied pages, placing them on the table next to my plate. I found his second set of ledgers, the ones he kept hidden, and I found years of bank statements. It's amazing how a person's life story can be told in numbers, isn't it? For every business investment you needed, for every down payment, there was a matching cash withdrawal from Dad's account. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, bleeding him dry for over a decade. Her husband, a man who always seemed so confident, was now looking from the papers to his wife, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But it wasn't just the money, was it? I continued, my voice low but carrying to every corner of the silent room. It was the secret you held over him. The story of Mr. Henderson, his first business partner. The man Dad cheated out of his share of the company all those years ago. A choked gasp came from my mother. Beverly's face had gone pale, her mask of composure finally cracking. You found out, I said, looking directly at her now. And you used his shame, his fear of being exposed, to control him. You threatened to ruin his reputation, to tear this family apart, unless he gave you everything you wanted. This house, I said, gesturing around the room, it wasn't a gift. It was the last payment for your silence. The truth was finally out, laid bare on the polished mahogany table, as ugly and undeniable as the secrets in that metal box. For a heartbeat, there was only a ringing silence. Then, the explosion. Beverly shot up from her chair, her face a mask of fury. How dare you? She shrieked, her voice cracking. How dare you come into my home and tell these disgusting lies? You've always been jealous of me. You couldn't stand that Dad loved me more, that he gave me what you thought you deserved. She turned to her husband, her eyes wild. Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to poison you against me. It's all lies. But her husband wasn't looking at her. His eyes were glued to the photocopied letter on the table, the one where my father pleaded with Beverly to stop her threats. He picked it up, his hand shaking slightly as he read. I saw the moment the truth landed on him. It was a subtle shift in his expression, the dawning horror, the sickening realization that the woman he had built his life with was a stranger. He looked at Beverly, and for the first time, there was no adoration in his eyes, only a cold, devastating clarity. That was when my mother finally broke. A low, guttural sob escaped her lips. It wasn't a cry of anger, but of complete and utter brokenness. She wasn't just crying for my father's secret or Beverly's betrayal. She was crying for her own willful blindness, for all the years she had chosen the easier path, ignoring the quiet injustices happening right under her own roof. The beautiful illusion of our family, the one we had all pretended to believe in for so long, had just been shattered into a million irreparable pieces. When a family breaks like this, right down to its very foundation, can the pieces ever truly be put back together? Or are some things just broken for good? I'd really like to know what you think. The weeks that followed Thanksgiving were not filled with shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. The explosion had already happened. What was left was the quiet, grim work of sifting through the wreckage. Lawyers became involved, their letters and phone calls replacing the heated words of a family dinner. Beverly, faced with photocopies of my father's ledgers and the undeniable evidence of her blackmail, had nowhere left to hide. Her blustering denials crumbled under the cold, hard weight of legal scrutiny. Her husband, I learned later, had moved out the day after Thanksgiving. The public scandal she had always used as a weapon against my father was now her own greatest fear. To avoid criminal charges for elder financial abuse and the humiliation of having the whole sordid story dragged through a public court, she agreed to a private settlement. The will was officially invalidated on the grounds of undue influence. My lawyer asked me what I wanted. For a moment, a bitter, vengeful part of me wanted to take everything, to leave her with nothing, just as she had planned to do to me. But as I looked at the papers, at my father's shaky handwriting, I knew that wasn't the answer. Vengeance would only make me a mirror image of my sister. What I wanted was not revenge, it was justice. I took back the family home, the place that held my heart. I took back a fair portion of the estate that was rightfully mine, enough to secure my own future. The rest, we placed in a trust for my mother's care, managed by a neutral third party. I wasn't just reclaiming my inheritance. I was reclaiming my own integrity. I was ending the cycle of greed and manipulation, not continuing it. 1 year later, the house is filled with warmth and the scent of roasting turkey, but this year, it's a different kind of warmth. It's not the frantic, stressful heat of obligation, but the gentle, steady glow of genuine happiness. This Thanksgiving, the guests in my home are not the family I was born into, but the one I have chosen. My dear Aunt Phyllis is here, her laughter echoing in the kitchen. A few close friends, the ones who checked on me during the darkest weeks, are arranging platters and pouring wine. There are fewer people around the table this year, but there is infinitely more love. The house feels like mine now. I've repainted the walls a soft, buttery yellow, and filled the rooms with flowers. The heavy, oppressive portraits of my ancestors are gone, replaced with photos of my friends, of my own life. It's a home that breathes, a place of peace. A few days ago, a simple card arrived in the mail. It was from my mother. Inside, in her shaky handwriting, were just 3 words. I am sorry. It wasn't a full confession, not a detailed apology, but it was a start. It was an acknowledgement. There has been no word from Beverly. I hear through the grapevine that she and her husband are separated, that she sold her large house and moved to a smaller condo across town. I don't feel joy at her misfortune, only a quiet, sad sense of finality. Our story is over. As I look around the table at the smiling faces, at the people who see me for who I am, I feel a sense of peace settle over me, so profound it feels like coming home to myself after a long and difficult journey. I am finally, truly, thankful. Later that evening, after the last of my friends have gone home, I stand on the front porch, wrapped in a warm sweater, looking out into the cool November night. The house behind me is quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet, a contented silence that feels like a deep, restful breath. For so many years, I thought my legacy was to be a caregiver, a silent supporter in someone else's story. I thought this house was my rightful reward for that sacrifice. But I was wrong. The house is just wood and nails and memories. The real inheritance wasn't something my father could write in a will. It was the strength I had to find within myself to unearth the truth and demand my own worth. On the mantelpiece, next to a vase of autumn flowers, I've placed an old photograph of Beverly and me as children, building a snowman in the front yard. For months, I couldn't look at it without feeling a hot surge of anger. But tonight, I just feel a quiet sadness for the little girl she used to be, and for the sister I lost long before our father died. I've come to understand that forgiveness isn't about absolving Beverly of what she did. It's not about pretending the pain wasn't real. Forgiveness is about letting go of the hope that the past could have been any different. It's about releasing the bitterness that was poisoning me, not her. My legacy isn't one of silent sacrifice anymore. It's one of quiet strength, of breaking a cycle. It's the story of a woman who finally learned that she was worthy of being the main character in her own life. My journey has been a long and painful one, but it brought me back home, to myself. If my story has touched you in any way, perhaps you could share it with someone who needs a gentle reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your own story and find your own peace.